Coming up on River City Presents, it's part 2 of our series on World War I with Professor of History Brent Taylor. Welcome to River City Presents. I'm Daniel Hurt. Last time we were talking to Professor of History Brent Taylor from WKCTC about World War I. The last time we saw you, we were discussing the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks again.
And tell us now, the powder keg has blown up. Austria-Hungary is now going to be embroiled in a war, World War I. Little did they know at the time, I suppose. So who starts the kickoff after that?
All right, so Archduke Ferdinand is considered the short-term spark. That's another one of these history phraseology things. That's the short-term spark that starts the war. And then from there you go to Austria, because Austria has made the demands. They've got the Austrian ultimatum to Serbia. Serbia says, "No, we can't do all these things. You've made too many demands here. We can't possibly bend the knee in this way. We can't do it." And Austria said, "Well, we tried to warn you." Now, there's another thing in play here, which is we want to make sure that Germany is in fact on board because of the alliance. We're in the Central Powers together. And the dirty secret on that is Germany's just fine with this turning into a war.
It gives them a chance to flex their muscles, maybe.
Yeah, they're the rising power. Remember, brand new. And in fact, they sort of feel left out. They feel like the French have had their time, the British have had their time, the Spanish have had their time, but this is the time for Germany.
The German century, maybe.
Yeah, and they even had catchphrases for it. It was a place in the sun. A place in the sun. It goes back, it's kind of a weird thing. It was a speech that the Kaiser had given once at a regatta, like a yacht race.
Man, the life that the Kaiser must live.
Yeah. So they're just fine with this. And in fact, they've been planning for the next war because it's kind of what you do. Militarism is one of the long-term causes, right? And so we assume the next war is coming.
So is there like an indirect arms race?
Oh yeah. Arms race is a big part of this. What we call the main causes of World War I.
Yeah. Militarism,
the alliances, industrialization, there's your arms race, and then nationalism. And together, that makes the main causes. M-I-M-A-I-N. That's an old teacher trick.
Ah, yes, you and your acronyms.
Right.
Makes me think remember the main, though. That's a different one, though.
Yeah.
But I you know, it's just fascinating to me that some of those have continued on even after this war, even into the future. It's like they didn't learn their lesson in World War I on nationalism or any of that.
Oh, those are also the same causes of World War II.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're correct.
So, as far as the alliances go, so everybody's going to pick a side now, and
yes.
So so lay out the sides for me. Who's the Axis or the Central Powers? Who's the Allied powers?
So Central Powers, your main ones would be Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. Then, on the other side, you have the Allies. They are England, France, but also Russia. These are the main ones. Italy's a funny story. Italy started off on one side, switched sides. They're going to end up on the Allies.
They can't quite figure out where they want to. They want to be on the winning team, but they don't.
That may be the whole thing there. And then you get the smaller ones. Of the smaller ones, the ones that are most important are Serbia, because that's where the whole thing started. And that's how the Serbians became good guys, and it's how the Austrians became bad guys. But then Belgium.
Okay.
So Belgium is very unfortunate geographically.
Yeah.
It's right between England and France.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's right between Germany and France. And so you're in between these two big major powers.
It's the highway.
It is the highway. France and Germany touch each other, but it's in a very inconvenient location. The convenient invasion route is through Belgium. Wide open, flat. It's a natural invasion route. Belgium was trying to be neutral. Germany ignored that, stormed through Belgium, ran Belgium over to get to France, and that's how Belgians became these sympathetic figures. That's how they became good guys. That's how the Germans became bad guys.
Well, I always love that. John Oliver, the comedian, once said, you know, every time that Germany goes right, they go right through Belgium. And unfortunately, I think that is an accurate turn of phrase if we look at history. But so I'm assuming that the trench lines are drawn right through there, right?
That's where it's going to happen. You're also going to see some action in France. The Germans had what was called the von Schlieffen plan.
Okay.
Count Alfred von Schlieffen was the author of the plan.
Sounds like a guy who'd have a plan.
That's the German-most sounding plan that you can possibly imagine. They try to account for having enemies on both sides. We got Russia on one side, we've got France on the other. Now they realize Russia is technologically backwards, although it does have a lot of manpower. So the plan is put up a token defense on that side against Russia, thrust everything that you've got at France, overrun Paris, kind of encircle, overrun. They'll do the French thing and surrender, according to the plan.
Right, historically.
And then you turn back on Russia. And then we have a whole separate plan involving U-boats to deal with England.
Boy, we're good with plans, but like the Germans are great with plans, but like how often do those turn into reality the way they think they're going to go? So I'm assuming that the technology, this is again that 19th century mindset, we're just going to do it this way and it's going to be fine, groupthink. But obviously machine guns and trench warfare slowed that down.
The machine gun is the key on this. So under the old circumstances with rifles and whatnot, maybe the plan could have worked. But with machine guns in entrenched defensive positions, there's no way. So you can try to do a flank. So they attempted that. Oh, there's more machine guns. Okay, the book says do another flank. So okay, we do that, more machine guns.
But the problem with this is you only have so many men. And like you see in movies like 1917 or All Quiet on the Western Front, you got guys in trenches who they ring a bell and you take off running across this empty space of land, right? And then they're just mowed down. So I mean, they're dead en masse.
Yeah, it's catchphrase time. So that's called going over the top.
I got it.
You hop up out of the trench at the signal. You then attempt to transverse no man's land. No man's land is the area between the two trenches.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Oh, it's nasty out there.
Place you wouldn't want to be.
No, it's aptly named. Because if you get out there, your odds are going way down.
Because you're in a line of sight pretty much of the enemy and your side, right? The machine guns travel in a straight line, you're going to get it. Yeah,
there's really no hope out there. Now later they learned a few ways and tricks to deal with it, but especially early in the war.
It's just sort of like sharp barbed wire and like obstacles and stuff out there.
Yeah, there's a ton of razor wire, barbed wire.
What's the purpose of all that?
It's to keep people out of there or from getting across there very quickly. It's to slow them down. Then you can mow them down.
Right.
It is really a bad way to do it if you're in the infantry.
And there are some really famous battles, right, that took place long periods of time, like the Somme, right?
So let's
talk about the Somme. Give me the lowdown on that.
Once we hit trench warfare, it's a stalemate. And again, it goes back to the commanders and their standard operating procedures. Standard operating procedure says, we're at a standstill, we need to make progress, we need to advance.
Yeah.
Go over the top. And so they're just going to send everybody streaming out there.
What do you do when you run out of boys, though? I guess draft some more?
Yeah, we're going to keep going with it. And it's going to go back and forth, and the body counts are going to start getting into the hundreds of thousands.
Wasn't it Hemingway or somebody who wrote books about the inevitability and death of war during the Great War?
It is funny about the art around that period. It gets sort of apocalyptic-like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think There's this one about the second coming that was written.
That's the one I was just thinking about.
The falconer cannot hear the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Is that the one you're?
Yeah. So things are spinning out of control, right? Yes.
It's turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. All the blood dim tide is lost, and there is chaos loosed upon the world.
That's it.
And that sort of, even back home, I'm assuming this sort of resonates, right? So even in America, who's not involved yet, and in Britain, France, there's this sense of doom, perhaps.
Okay, well, as far as we're concerned, we're curious about it, but it's really awesome because it's not our problem.
And Wilson, of course, is isolationist, and
that's what the campaign said.
He
kept us out of war is the campaign slogan. But we also know at the same time that Wilson's a progressive. And there's that progressive itch at the turn of the 20th century. We're problem solvers.
He likes him some collective security, as we know.
Yeah. Internationalist. We're doers. So we can't just see an evil and not address it.
Would you say that Wilson saw the U.S.'s role as like, okay, so ultimately they do get involved, but like as honest brokers coming in to break up the children of Europe, so to speak?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty fair, especially at the end. He's going to be viewed by the people of Europe as something of a savior.
Yeah.
And that's really bad for Wilson's ego because his ego was already large going into this. And then it's going to sort of inform what will happen in the peace process.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that, we were talking about trench warfare in the Somme, and one of the things that I always thought was fascinating, I saw a movie recently where they talked about how much the land was destroyed during World War I, and it shows this like quick fast-forwarded play-by-play of the land, and it shows how sort of war eradicates all of the animal life, the grass dies, it just becomes a gray, muddy, mushy death area. What do you make of that? Isn't that fascinating how it sort of tells its own tale?
Yeah, we don't think very much about that, but it is pretty important. There's a photograph that I'm thinking of. It shows basically little splinters left of trees, and then the caption says, "Once a forest."
Wow.
It's pretty impactful.
It's sort of the all-encompassing war eats everything up, doesn't it? And it kills everything, including the life of the land around. And I think that's probably the first time you saw in a war really something that you could go into a war zone and be like, whoa, this looks like hell on earth, sort of.
Yeah. I've seen a few Civil War photos where you see the impact on trees, and then they're all shot up, but it's nothing like this. I mean, this was almost like you went in there and clear-cut it. Yeah.
However, though, we did not just reserve our destruction for the ground. We had other means in modern war. We're in the skies, too. So tell us about some of the air war, because this is the first major conflict, or conflict as far as I know of any kind,
yes,
where there's airplanes used, right?
Yeah, airplanes are considered new as of World War I, just like U-boats and tanks and the machine gun. And they do have some bombs. It's primarily a bunch of show-off stuff and recon stuff. And then they'll get in fights against each other.
Like the aces.
Yeah, the World War I aces. This is Red Baron stuff.
I like his pizza, I must say.
Yeah, it is the best of the frozen pizzas.
I think everybody knows Red Baron is frozen pizza, but it's just great to say that out loud. But it's just fascinating how, I suppose that's the time when, if you're looking for propaganda, if you're looking for a news story, it's really cool to say that there's, this ace fighter pilot. It's probably good for morale, right? To have your guy winning.
Heroes are great.
Yeah.
And we did make several heroes out of these guys. Rickenbacker is one example. And then, of course, the Red Baron on the German side.
So, and another, the other people that show up a little later, of course, is like Hermann Göring, who was a fighter ace in World War I, who will become the head of the Air Force in Nazi Germany later, right?
Yeah, and like so many of these leaders of World War II, they served in some capacity in World War I. Harry Truman's a great example.
Yeah.
In the artillery.
So he was what, a commander, right? Or some...
Yeah, he was an officer in the artillery.
And I think, that, of course, there's the big one that everybody knows about is Hitler, of course, served in World War I.
Right.
They told him his art wasn't very good, and he said, all right, I'll do something else then. And we made a terrible mistake.
Well, so when the art career doesn't work out, you go to the place that's always hiring, which is the military.
It's like all love. When you lose love, you go to become a soldier. You know, it's the classic storyline.
Yeah.
So what's Hitler doing? Where is he at in this war?
He is a very low-ranking soldier in the war, but he was also highly decorated at the same time. There was a prestigious award called the Iron Cross. Mm-hmm. He got 2 of them.
Oh, wow.
So this is kind of a big deal. It'd be like, yeah, I got 2 medals of honor.
So he's like injured too, right? I'm assuming, or was there?
He was injured. That's one thing. So he was temporarily blinded by the poison gas. And there was another minor injury that I remember reading about as well. So that's another point. So many of these guys were sent back out time and time again. We get you patched up,
man.
Send you back out.
You survived one charge over a trench, and they're like, okay, so we're going to press your luck, like the game show, and try it again.
Yeah, and that is the way that it was working there.
And you, of course, didn't have a choice, because if you said no, you were just obeying a command, and that could get you shot on some fronts.
Right, and then there's the hero stuff like Hitler. So one Iron Cross is that he helped bring a fellow comrade back to safety, kind of a Forrest Gump thing.
Yeah.
And then his other thing was like a Sergeant York thing, where he captured an entire machine gun nest of Frenchmen.
Oh, wow.
Using just his pistol.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things, come out, we have you surrounded. And we're surrounded, okay.
And it's just one guy?
You got us, yeah.
Oh, man. Well,
so 2 Iron Crosses.
So Goering and Hitler, Rommel also makes an appearance in that front as well. He's the Italian campaign. He gets ranked up there too. It's just amazing to think about all these players. And I suppose that gives them all a little bit of legitimacy coming up too, right?
Well, they have walked the walk.
I mean, whenever they're making a play for being in power, what leads to World War II, it's like all these guys understand. They're
they're veterans, and so they know all about it.
Well, and then, the other thing that I was thinking about too is, so not just airplanes, but also submarines. So we have U-boats now, and that's going to change the way things work, especially with trade, right? So
yes.
Tell me a little bit about how that impacts and ultimately the United States.
Submarines are also considered new. Now, like many of these weapons, they're not 100% new, but they are considered new for World War I. It is the Unterseeboot, the underwater boat.
Das Boot, the movie.
Yeah. That's the boat, right? Das Boot. And so this is the new weapon. Germany is using it as a shortcut.
I got it.
Because England owns the water. But if you can come out with this new cutting-edge weapon,
if you can sink their ships,
you can sink all the ships, and they're going to draw a submarine war zone and a giant circle around England. And that's going to be the play. Choke them out.
And of course, the U.S. is trading with Britain, even though we're not in the war.
Of course.
Ultimately,
right.
U-boats, German U-boats sink the Lusitania, and that's sort of the launching pad, right?
Yeah, so the Lusitania, that's another one of these things. It's a British ship, so it comes to New York, and while it's in New York, it's advertising for a really nice thing called Round the World Tours. You're thinking, oh, a cruise, that would be great this time of year.
Yeah.
And so people are getting
I'm just already there.
I know. The people are going to get on the boat and all this stuff. But if they would have read the fine print, just below that advertisement, there's another advertisement that was taken out by the German embassy. And the German embassy tried to warn people. They said, I'll paraphrase here, hey, don't you remember World War I? And there's a war zone all around England, and ships with the British flag are in a lot of danger. So if you do so, you will travel at your own risk.
Well, that's a warning.
Yeah, sure was.
Doesn't really matter, though, when Americans get killed, does it?
That was the whole thing. I guess people didn't read the warning, or they saw the warning and said, this is a cruise ship, it's different. But the whole thing was unrestricted submarine warfare. This is the new German policy. Unrestricted submarine warfare.
Anyone's fair game then.
Yeah, anything. No holds barred, no rules. Tables, ladders, chairs, thumbtacks. It's all in play. And if it moves, sink it. And so you're thinking, well, what about ships with food for refugees? Sink it. What about a cruise ship? Sink it.
So they're just asking for it.
Yeah. That's going to tickle that progressive
Hey, you know,
thing
if
with
an
Wilson.
American gets killed abroad, that's our responsibility to respond to that, is the
Sure.
mindset that comes from that. So what happens after Lusitania? Kept us out of the war is no longer a promise kept. He's forced, so to speak, to engage in World War I.
It's re-messaging time and rebranding time. We're no longer, he kept us out of war. It is now we must make the world safe for democracy.
Right. And so when the U.S. gets involved, it's a pretty quick end to the war, right? They get in fairly toward the end.
Yeah, this is how we like our wars, short and successful.
Come in and wrap it up.
This is our favorite sort of conflict. We're going to ride into the rescue. We'll save the day.
We will be greeted as liberators.
We'll be greeted as liberators. Wilson will come in as a messiah. And in the process, we will lose 100,000 soldiers, which is...
Not nothing.
That's big.
Yeah.
That is third on our all-time list.
Wow. So how does the war wrap up? Because with trench warfare, it doesn't seem like the borders moved very much, right?
They didn't, but they are moving backwards slowly. And that created a political crisis within Germany. So those guys, there's a lot of pressure now. Hey, wait a minute. Why are we suddenly losing? Well, the answer is America drafted 4 million guys, and there's no extra 4 million from the Central Powers.
Right.
So it's just a sheer manpower attrition thing. And then that created a crisis. It brought down the monarchy.
The Kaiser.
The Kaiser. Kaiser Wilhelm II, the bad guy.
He was sort of an emperor, so to speak. Right?
Yes. Yeah. So Kaiser is emperor. Right. He's going to have to flee. He went up to a different country. And now they're going to put in a brand new government, which, on messaging, is a republic.
Oh.
We're making the world safe for democracy.
So we did regime change, basically.
That's where it ended up.
Right.
And you get these new guys in, first order of business, armistice, end the war.
November 11th, the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month.
Correct.
And so what we celebrate as Veterans Day now was Armistice Day, of course.
That's the origin of it.
And so we just quit shooting, and then at that point you have the Treaty of Versailles, and all that sort of begins, and it puts the screws to them, right? And that, as far as the sequel goes, the events that of course take place after the Central Powers surrender does what? It will lead to the second one, right?
Yeah, that's the plot twist.
And, you know, and also, what else is going on? We got Russia at the same time. They're in the middle of their revolution, or they're about to have theirs, right?
Yeah, so the consequences of this are so far-reaching. When you have World War I up there in the 19-teens, it sets the stage for everything else that's going to happen internationally all throughout the rest of the century. Obviously, World War II, that's a direct sequel.
Right.
But then the Cold War.
And folks, if you'll watch the episode on interwar years that we do, we cover that one in detail as well. So check that out. Segue.
Brought to you by Red Baron Pizza.
But yes, so that and the Russian Revolution. So as you were saying, everything is sort of the perfect setup, right, for what's happening.
That's it. You're going to set that stage.
It's just amazing that the first war, the Great War, maybe it's called great because it's the thing that defines the whole century, ultimately.
In retrospect, you could still consider it that, for sure. In its time, though, it was. Had there been no World War II, people would still look back at that in amazement. Can you believe there was a war that killed 15 million people?
Yeah.
Can you believe they just sent those wave after wave after wave of soldiers
How
against each
barbaric
other?
of us to run people into combat like that, right?
Yeah.
Little did we know, it's like, well, it can't get worse than this. And every time you say that, it always does. So
Just in time.
But we're out of time, and but I appreciate you coming back as always. What a good way to start off the first part of a new season of the show.
Anytime.
Look forward to having you back. That was my guest, Brent Taylor. We discussed World War I in a two-part series. This is part 2. We hope you'll join us next time. Thank you.